Okay, so this week, consumer sales and credit. So let's just dive right in and talk about what is credit. Credit is essentially an agreement between a borrower and a lender that allows a borrower to receive goods and services before paying for them in full, with the understanding that the borrower will pay the lender back later, usually with interest. Common types of credit include credit card, mortgages, student loans, car loans, and payday loans. So how much credit or how much interest can you be charged? And you actually can be charged too much interest, and that's referred to as usury. And usury is the act of charging too much interest and is generally controlled through state law. In some states, usurious lenders forfeit the excessive interest. So there's really three ways that usury is dealt with in state law. Some states, the usurious lender forfeits the excessive interest. So if I'm allowed to be charged 10% maximum on a personal loan and somebody's charging me 15%, they would forfeit that extra 5%. Other states, the entire interest amount is forfeited. So in some states, if somebody is charging me a usurious interest rate, so I'm going to use the 10% legal maximum, and somebody is charging 15%, which would be usurious. So in other states, that entire interest amount is forfeited, so they lose the interest, they just get the principal back. And then in a few states, when somebody is charging a usurious interest rate, they forfeit the principal and the interest. So they don't get the interest back and they don't get what they lent me back. Three different ways that usurious amounts are dealt with. California is the excess interest. So if somebody charges more than 10% on a personal loan, they forfeit the amount over that 10%. So here's three examples of typical loopholes that we see in usury laws. Personal loans in California are capped at 10%. What I mean by a personal loan is loans between like friends and family. If I go down the street to a payday lender, their loan isn't capped at 10%. They can actually charge me 15%, and they can compound it in a way that is super detrimental to me. And I'll explain that in just a minute. Credit cards are typically capped at 30%. Didn't used to be that way. I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. And then payday loans in California are capped at 15%, and the max loan amount that you can get is $300 at a time. So taking a closer look at payday loans, because that's the one that I think people are most familiar with, and it's also the most deadly to your credit and your financial status. So payday loans are known officially as deferred deposit transactions, and they're overseen by the California Department of Business Oversight, or the CDBO. And the CDBO allows maximum payday loan of $300 to be charged with a fee of 15% by the lender. What that means in practice, because of the way that the loan is compounded, or the interest is compounded, the borrower faces an annual interest rate of 460% on a 2-week loan. So it's not really that 15%, folks, because of the way that it's compounded. If the loan can't be paid off in time, and many times they can't, the debt can be rolled over with a new loan and new fees. So if you don't pay off the payday loan in time, they turn it into a new loan at another 15%, which is again compounded on a weekly basis. And so those fees generally become more, you generally pay much more in fees than you do for the original loan amount. So the average payday loan borrower in California is in debt for 5 months of the year, spending an average of $520 fees to repeatedly borrow $375. Payday loans are a bad deal for consumers, but because of the way that they're legislated and because of the consumer demand and the risk associated for the payday lender, this is allowable and not considered usurious. So moving on to some important consumer credit laws, laws that protect you, the borrower. Probably the most important one is the Truth in Lending Act, which requires lenders to inform borrowers of the terms of their credit transactions. So before you go and get a loan, they're going to give you a bunch of paperwork that tells you the interest rate that you're paying, the amount of time that it's going to take you to pay it back, your payment amount. If it is a revolving credit account like a credit card, it's going to tell you how much it's going to take you to pay it off if you make a minimum payment. Actually, that's the Card Act. I'll talk about that one in a minute. So lots of things, lots of advantages to borrowers via the Truth in Lending Act. Banks didn't have to tell you all that information, or they did, but they didn't make it. It didn't have to be in plain English, and it didn't have to be readily available to you. The Consumer Leasing Act amends the TILA to provide similar disclosures for folks who lease things like automobiles or other types of goods, home furnishings, for example, if the goods are valued at $25,000 or less and the lease is for 4 months or more. All of the material terms of the lease must be disclosed in writing. Probably the biggest one that has impacted us, at least in my lifetime, has been the Credit Card Accountability and Responsibility and Disclosure Act, or the CARD Act of 2009. And the CARD Act amended the TILA to provide specific protections to credit card holders, like, for example, telling you that if you only make the minimum payment, how long it's going to take you to pay off your credit card. The CARD Act did a lot of really good things. But as with all legislation, there were some give and take. And so one of the things that the CARD Act did was, before the CARD Act was enacted, the maximum interest rate that you could pay on a credit card was 21 to 23%. And with the CARD Act, that amount increased to 30%. So there was some great stuff that happened with the CARD Act and some negative stuff that happened with the CARD Act. The reading this week has some very specific protections listed. So go ahead and take a look at that to learn about the specific protections provided by the CARD Act. Equal Credit Opportunity Act prohibits discrimination with respect to any credit transaction. That one is still very difficult to enforce. I'm going to share some videos that have something to do with the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. The Fair Credit Reporting Act requires specific disclosures to be provided to people seeking credit. And the Fair Credit Billing Act protects consumers from billing errors on their credit cards. One of the nice things about the Fair Credit Billing Act, which was facilitated by the CARD Act, is the fact that now it's very easy to dispute a charge on your credit card. I get a lot of those reoccurring monthly, oh, I signed up for a trial for something and then I forgot to cancel it. And so you get these reoccurring charges on your card. It makes it very easy to dispute things like that. In many cases, all you have to do is sign on to your credit card app and tell them that you don't want that charge, and they immediately remove it, thanks to the Fair Credit Billing Act and the CARD Act. So moving on to some additional purchase protections for consumers, and probably the most common type of protection that we're going to see is a warranty. Warranties can be express or implied. Express meaning that the seller affirms that the product will perform in a certain manner. Formal words like warrant and guarantee are not necessary, and a seller can create a warranty by their words or by their action. For example, if I'm selling a car, and in the advertisement, I list the number of miles on the car, well, that creates a warranty. If I say the tires are new, that creates a warranty. Going through Costco, they have all of the sample people at Costco. When they provide you with a sample of a product that Costco is selling, they're warranting that product, that it's going to taste that way when prepared in the way that the person who is providing the sample is preparing it. Usually they're just putting it in an oven. They're not putting extra spices on it, or they're not doing anything fancy with it. So, affirmation of fact or promise relating to the goods. Car has 30,000 miles on it. Any description of the goods. So you go into Amazon and you see a description of maybe the sweatpants that you're about to buy. A sample or model, like going to Costco and seeing the sample people hand out samples. All of those create express warranties that the goods will conform to the fact, promise, description, sample, or model. Express warranties can be oral or they can be written. No one at Costco, when they're handing out the sample to you, is also providing you with a written warranty about what the product is going to taste like. Okay, they're telling you this is blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. Okay, that is an oral express warranty. Warranties can also be implied, and those are warranties that are created by the circumstances alone. An implied warranty is typically created by law, acting from an impulse of common sense. So, two really important implied warranties. The first is the implied warranty of merchantability, and I'll refer to it as the warranty of merchantability in most cases. I leave out the implied part. That's just the implied is implied, I guess. And the implied warranty of merchantability basically says that unless excluded or modified, a warranty that the goods should be merchantable is implied upon the contract of sale if the seller is a merchant of goods in that kind. Basically, what the implied warranty of merchantability says is that goods are fit for their ordinary purposes. If I, for example, buy a water bottle, there is an implied warranty of merchantability that this will hold water or whatever beverage it is without leaks, okay, and that I can use it to drink from. It does not imply that I can put gasoline in this because this is not made for gasoline, it's made for beverages. I guess I could put sand in it, I don't know. But goods are fit for their ordinary purposes. Implied warranty of fitness for a particular purpose is a little bit different. Let's say that I go into a vacuum cleaner store and I am looking for a new vacuum cleaner. And I say to the vacuum cleaner salesperson, hi, I'm looking for a vacuum cleaner, and I'm looking for a vacuum cleaner that will vacuum up the socks off my floor because I'm really not good at taking my socks off and putting them in the laundry basket. I want a vacuum cleaner that does that. Will this vacuum cleaner do that? And I hold up a vacuum cleaner. If the vacuum cleaner salesperson says, why, yes, that will pick up your socks, no problem. Well, they have just warranted that particular vacuum cleaner for that particular purpose, picking up my socks, okay? And so with fitness for a particular purpose, the seller is somebody who is involved in selling those types of goods, and they are aware of the purpose that you are going to use the product for. Most often than not, a smart seller is going to say, when confronted with me asking about whether or not the vacuum cleaner will pick up my socks, is, I don't know, you could try that. And so they're not warranting it for that purpose, and they're telling me it's on me to go and try it. So that's fitness for a particular purpose. Warranties can be excluded or disclaimed. So the UCC permits sellers to exclude or disclaim warranties both in whole or in part. An oral warranty can very easily be disclaimed. If I tell you something as I'm selling it to you and you are buying the product based on what I'm saying, you're going to ask me to write it down because written warranties cannot be disclaimed. If a salesperson or a business takes the time to write out a warranty and give it to a buyer, they can't later say, well, yes, we wrote that down, but we didn't mean it, or we're excluding it, okay? The implied warranty of merchantability can be disclaimed by a seller. So a seller can say, we are disclaiming, we're going to sell you this water bottle, but it's not made for water. But they have to do it in a way that it is conspicuous. Generally, that conspicuousness includes the term merchantability, okay? They have to use the word merchantability, and many states prohibit sellers from disclaiming implied warranties in the sale of consumer goods, meaning that Walmart, for example, cannot disclaim the warranty of merchantability for my water bottle. There are two ways that implied warranties can be disclaimed. The first is using the term as is. So when you see something for sale in as is condition, that is exactly what it means. You're buying it with all faults, okay? Which is why another term to disclaim implied warranties is that term with all faults. So Consumer protections are both statutory in nature, and once you purchase products, you are protected by warranties unless they are disclaimed. Warranty protection comes from the UCC. Your consumer credit protections come from statutory law. And that's it for this lecture.